What is up, fight fans? Welcome to the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. We are coming to you live from the number 38 presented by Volo. I'm your host, Jordan Kurtz. You can give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. Got my man Danny Bailey behind the boards holding it down for me as always each and every week. First and foremost, before we dive into the thick of the things with the show here, I want to give a shout out to the crew here at the Mile High Sports Network. They are the go-to guys for all things in the core four sports out there. Right now, there is no shortage of things going on with the CU Buffs. You have NFL mini camps in motion. The NHL playoffs for the Stanley Cup are going on right now. Unfortunately, the Avalanche were tragically eliminated recently. But on the positive side, in the NBA, you have the Denver Nuggets still in the thick of things. They are in a series gridlocked at 2-2 right now. They play tonight against the Oklahoma City Thunder, looking to pull themselves right back ahead in that series. In Major League Baseball, we have the just the problem child. It's every single week there is no shortage, or there is always something that just never ceases to amaze me that comes from the Rockies, or just dumb headline that comes from ownership and the Monforts. This time it coming from Dick Monfort. They fired manager Bud Black. Right now they're currently 7-34. Last week when we were sitting here with you, they only had 6 wins. So they won once over the last week and lost another few games in the process. Bud Black was fired, but this is not on him. This is on the owners for not giving him something to work with. Bud Black is not the pitchers who are going out there and getting lit up like a Christmas tree. Bud Black is not the reason for the guys who were boot scooting boogieing the ball all around the yard on multiple occasions, and then on route to a 21-0 shellacking the other day, or some of the other games throughout this season where you look at them and it's like a Follies reel. How many errors can you make on one play? That's not on Bud Black. I don't care what you say. You firing him is just completely ignorant to the overall issue of what is going on out there, plain and simple. When you have a catcher who, if you made him a starting pitcher, has the highest ERA on your rotation, that's a problem. But moving along from that, going to get into this Colorado rundown. If you have the opportunity to buy tickets directly from the athletes and the fighters that are competing, please do so, whether that is paper form ticket or that is online through the digital point of sale system using that drop down or the promo code. It's usually their last name in the process. If you don't know someone, but you're still going, choose somebody anyway. It's going to help them as far as their commission goes and how they get paid out. Coming up at the end of the month, we have our first Grapple Games event for CJJC. We have Card Jitsu. We are still taking applications for applicants in a couple of the divisions that are out there. There's going to be some prizes that are involved in the process as well for that. So make sure that you go to jujitsuclub.co and fill out that application today. Our matchmakers will get that all sorted out for you there on that front. On May 31st, up in Greeley, Colorado, you have the No-Co Showdown going down at the Island Grove for Sparta Sports and Entertainment. Going to be a mix of multiple different combat sports disciplines on that card. On June 13th, Friday the 13th, at the Stampede, we have Colorado Combat Club in action. That's going to be headlined by a flyweight matchup between Kelvin Martinez, that is brother of UFC veteran Jonathan Martinez, taking on local flyweight and a fixture of many cards out here on the local scene in Alex, the Puerto Rican Demon Rego. Like I say, there is going to be a multitude of high-octane fights on that card. We also have a couple of friends of the program in Bobby Zviefren, who's going to be fighting another friend of the program in Connor Leonard. This is going to be a card that you definitely want to check out. A lot of high-stakes matchups from the local guys. That is going to be June 13th at the Stampede. Following that, you have the next weekend of the first show for Guerrilla Fighting Championship going down at the Pueblo Convention Center. That's June 21st. Going to be headlined by Darian Robinson taking on AJ Robb, a couple of featherweights who have been on the scene here on the local and the regional level. quite some time. Both of them have experienced under the respective banners of LFA as well as Fury. Lots of fights amongst them between guys who have been on the top level and have a plethora of experience there. Certainly something that you want to check out. And you have another friend of the program in the Steel City Kid, Nico Cornejo, is going to be in the co-main event on that show as well. The following week from that, you have on the Friday night, you have 5280 Muay Thai Fight Series going down at the Stampede. The next day, you have Battle MMA Championships happening in Colorado Springs at the Colorado Springs City Hub. Be sure to check out all of those events that are going down. And as we get the updates on more events coming up on the horizon for this Colorado schedule, we'll be sure to get you the information for those. Again, if you can purchase the tickets directly from the fighters or on the online point of sale system using their promo code, please do so. It definitely helps them out. Moving to the weekend recap. This last weekend in the UFC, action went down in Montreal, up there in Quebec. This was a night of fights that, you saw a couple of big time upsets and a couple of breakout performances, if you will. And then you had a couple of fights where you figured that would be the outcome, maybe not exactly how it got there, but let's take a dive into some of these here, because there are definitely some of them that it played a major factor in how some of these next couple of weeks of matchups that are going to be announced are going to unfold. Starting from the top in the main event, we had Jack Della Maddalena winning the welterweight championship after he defeated Bilal Bully B. Remember the name Muhammad. Listen, Bilal catches a lot of flack, and I understand that he's brought a lot of it onto himself. The way that he's trolled online or some of the things that he said throughout his time in the UFC or on his rise on the way to getting the belt. And then since he's had it, I get it. And then especially after a while, he's dug into the character or played into being the heel once he realized that was kind of the response that he was getting. So I understand all of that, but I also don't really get some of the hate that gets thrown his way. Bilal is a talented fighter. Bilal is a really good fighter for that matter. He just is not exciting. There's been lots of fighters that have been that way throughout the course of history. That doesn't mean that they're any less effective. You could throw John Fitch in the realm at any point in time in history, and John Fitch is going to be competitive. If you ask somebody like Dana, a style like a John Fitch, well, you could watch the paint dry and it's going to be a little bit more exciting. But he won fights. He knew how to win. He knew how to be able to work himself positionally and in the right moments to be able to get the victory. Similarly, Bilal had he wasn't necessarily a Fitch, but there was essences of that, given that he trained with a lot of AKA guys, with the Eagle crew and the Nurmagomedovs, Makhachev, so on and so forth. Well, those guys were AKA guys. Fitch, an AKA guy. So there are some degrees of separation within their systems and their styles. But I think that this was a tale on one side of, why did Bilal not try to wrestle early? Why did Bilal wait so long to mix it up and to really try to grapple? That's a question that we were discussing at the gym yesterday, and we really don't have an answer to it. Why did it take him so long? What was presented his way? Was there something that maybe he got hit with early on that, that made him say, I don't want to walk through that hellfire to get to this takedown. I don't want to potentially hit this car crash in the process. That's a question that we can't really answer from the outside. And until or unless we ever get some sort of really revealing statement from Bilal as to his thought process or why he chose to approach it in that fashion, well, we won't really know. I think that it's a puzzling question to a lot of us that were out there watching, and why did he take so long to initiate grappling sequences? But at the same time, Jack is a tough problem to deal with. And he commits, but he doesn't overcommit. I mean, just look at his notes. He's not afraid to stand in the pocket and commit to his punches. But he never really overthrew. He didn't overextend to where he was left out of position and off balance. His head movement was slick all over the place. And the way that he was changing levels and mixing things up himself, and he did show some grappling initiation from his end just to show that it was there. That's a hard problem to deal with. And I don't know if it was more or less that just the chess piece that Jack Della Maddalena had on the board and what he was offering to Bilal was a tough cookie to crack to get his takedown entries or to find an opportunity to shoot without worrying about running into something. Did he get hit? I don't know what the answer to that question is. All I do know is we're left with the outside looking in questions of why wasn't there more of that? Ultimately, though, it's a kudos and a testament to the fluidity of Jack Della Maddalena. I mean, the way that he was able to stay within himself, his long chain combinations. Again, he didn't overcommit to just to try to yeet on him at any given point. He just was knock, 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 stick, knock, 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 boom. He was just rhythmic. He was flowing. He was always finding an exit and an angle whenever his offense was done. He found tremendous ways to inflict damage while mitigating what was coming back his way. That won him a world championship. But on the flip side, though, folks, I think that even though Bilal lost this fight, and sometimes it's hard to say that, oh, well, if somebody loses a world championship fight, if they lose the 12 pounds of gold that was on their waist as they entered the octagon that night, how does their stock rise? Well, again, Bilal, the knock to him was that he wasn't exciting or that, he was a boring guy, so on and so forth. That fight was anything but. That fight showed that Bilal really does have that dog in him. He's willing to bite down on his mouthpiece and protect what was his at all costs. Did he come up short? Yes. But the effort that was there, the grit, the heart, you can't question that. Broken orbital in multiple places, cut open all across his face. His lip was split open basically from the base of his lip all the way up to his nostrils. He fought with everything that he absolutely could have fought with. He put everything on the line to go out there and to try to defend that belt. If that doesn't earn your respect, I don't know what does. I think in that instance, Bilal really put himself over to a lot of the masses because of the display in that fight. Again, hey, it didn't go his way, but in certain respects, it was a win for Bilal Muhammad. I think in the court of public opinion, he went over, if you will, to take a term from wrestling. That fight also was a fight of the night winner, so that's an extra 50K to each of those guys. I mean, still, 50, what is that after a war like that? It's crazy, but enough to at least sweeten the deal a little bit in that respect. In the co-main event, you had Valentina Schevchenko retaining her flyweight title against Manon Fior. This one, I was right, but I was wrong. So I said last week that Valentina is a very smart champion, and she is going to use all the tools that she has within her tool belt to win the fight. I thought that it would be her wrestling and her grappling that was going to be able to do it against somebody who is a known striker, who is basically, was a striking specialist or a purist, if you will, in Manon Fior. I did not think that, again, hey, I stand corrected. I did not think that Valentina was going to get physically bullied the way that she did in certain exchanges with the grappling. I did not expect Fior to be that much bigger in terms of muscle mass once they were in the cage on Saturday. And I think that that's a little bit of a sign of Valentina is aging. You know, she is not the same Valentina as she was, you know, a few years ago in the height of her title reign. She has lost some muscle mass in the process. And I don't know that the Valentina of, you know, of 2019, 2020 gets pushed around or bullied the way that she did in a couple of those exchanges. But Valentina, being the world champion striker that she is, and she just coldly put it on her Instagram the day after, I've been knocking out French champions for 20 plus years. She posted a video of when she was a teenager knocking out some French kickboxer in a tournament when she was a kid. It was just kind of a y'all must have forgot who I am type of post. But it was Valentina's striking that got the job done for her, and it was because of the damage that she did early. Her ability to counter Manon and using Manon's pressure against her. She broke her nose at the very end of the first round, and that had implications for the rest of the contest. Valentina was just flat out quicker to the punch, and she was sharper in the moments where she needed to be. She was just sound enough, or she was just strong enough to be able to get herself in the right position in some of the grappling exchanges. Hey, it wasn't necessarily that she was ragdolled or blanketed. She was just more or less, she was smothered and she was kind of held up against the fence and controlled in a lot of those exchanges. And I think that Manon has a lot of ability, but I do believe that this was indicative of some of the holes within her game. I think that she has the potential to rally back and get to another title shot, couple of fights down the way in the future, though there are some more that are knocking on the door, a la Jasmine Jasudavicius, who was on the card. We're going to talk about her in a minute. But again, I think that this was just another one of those fights to say that, you know what, even though it was close, Valentina was the more well-rounded fighter, and she had more tools within her mixed martial arts tool belt than her opponent did, which allowed for her to have yet another successful title defense. Again, of the legacy belt era, she is the most successful champion in terms of title defenses since the 2019 debut of those legacy belts. That'll be another ruby added. I believe that is her 9th ruby for titles there. Another couple of fights to discuss there. We had Amin Zahabi taking on Jose Aldo. This was a controversial unanimous decision. Zahabi, the hometown guy, beats Jose Aldo with a 29-28 across the board. There's a lot of people that thought that Aldo did enough to win. I think that it was close. I think that you give round 1 to Aldo. Round 2 is fairly pedestrian, but I do believe that Zahabi won that round. So it comes to the third. Well, the third was a slobber knocker. It was a barn burner. You had Jose Aldo damn near put Amin Zahabi out. And let's give recognition to Zahabi's chin, because that kick that he took was square chin to chin right up against the fence. And yeah, it rocked him and it put him back, but he did not go out from it, and he was able to rally. And Jose Aldo flat out, he shot his water. He got tired. He had nothing left in the tank. With about 3 minutes and 30 seconds left, he took a step back when he could have been in a moment to press forward and push toward actually getting Zahabi out of there and a finish. And like, oh man, he used a lot of energy on that sprint trying to get him out of there with the kick, then with the sprint across the cage with the knee. Once he didn't get him out of there, you saw him take that big, deep belly breath. You knew, oh no, that was it. That was the last that he had in the tank. He takes a look up at the clock, and a very noticeable stop and look at the clock. I mean, almost like, hey, like, let me call time for a second type of look. Like, oh no, then that was basically a breath of fresh air. That was a shot in the arm, if you will, for Zahabi, who decided, okay, yeah, I'm hurt, but I'm still here, but he's done. I can go put the pace on him, and I can go take this fight from him right now. And that's exactly what he did. He started to then put it on Aldo. He gets the action down to the canvas, and again, hurt, exhausted, pushed to the brink himself. You hear from the corner and his brother Faraz. You hear from the legendary George St. Pierre saying elbows, elbows, effort, action, score, just telling him to continue with the activity, that Aldo has nothing left in the tank. Jose Aldo basically laid there in guard and just absorbed damage for 2 minutes and 20 seconds in the process. Got opened up. That essentially was the last time that, or according to him, he says that's the last time that we're going to see him. That's already, one time out of retirement. So who knows how that goes with Jose Aldo in that respect. But again, the way that round ended, despite it being so bad initially for Zahabi, it was equally as bad for Aldo at the very end. He just didn't find the shot to be able to completely put him out. But the damage, dominance, and duration for 3/4 of the round, as opposed to just the first quarter, was superior. That's why Zahabi gets that third round on the cards. Again, very controversial, but I can understand where someone would say, oh, well, then maybe this is a draw because you give the first two to Aldo and then a 10-8 in the third. But I can't necessarily get on board with a 10-8 in the third when Aldo had him so hurt early on. It's one of those that's going to be a controversial decision in that respect. But again, I think that this is one of those scenarios where it's a tight fight. The hometown kid gets the nod. And we also can't lose sight of the simple fact that Jose Aldo missed weight also by 8 pounds. Was it technically by the books or the official rulings a weight miss? No. Because they officially bumped it up to a featherweight matchup, but that was because Jose could not make the weight. He said that he had a multitude of injuries coming into the camp that kind of prevented him from being able to go through and get the weight all the way off and so on and so forth. And he didn't want to pull out despite doctors' recommendations because he knew that this was going to be his last fight. Is what it is. I'm sure that in that case, there was probably some sort of purse negotiation that was held as well. But unfortunately for Aldo, that is something that kind of is a tarnish on his legacy that is otherwise, he's always been thought of and will continue to be thought of as one of the greats to ever do it. But having a weight miss like that, it's not a good look. Another couple on the card to discuss. Natalia Silva has arrived at 125 pounds. She pitched a shutout against former women's champion Alexa Grasso. Alexa Grasso was the number 1 ranked women's flyweight. In that sense, you would think that depending on what the situation is at 125 for Valentina, do they make that Whaley fight? Do they look at something, different in that respect? Natalia Silva is now freshly moved up to the number 1 ranking in 125 pounds as of this morning. It's a pretty big jump, so that gives you maybe an indication of what they're looking at or who they're leaning towards. Where the next fight happens, when it happens, that's a good question. You have both of these ladies who are fresh off of this weekend. Whaley that's sitting out there. There's a couple of big cards out there that don't have fights on them yet. As the summer progresses, I don't think that it's a quick enough turnaround for either one of them for International Fight Week. But I do believe that we could very well see Silva in the mix for a title fight in the near future. Another one on the card, though, who I think that could very well be in line for a title shot or a title eliminator fight is Jasmine Jasudavicius. Jasmine Jasudavicius, she took on former champion, former strawweight champion in Jessica Andrade, but basically Andrade has been an any weight juggernaut for years. Has fought across 115, 125, 135. But now at this stage, unfortunately for Andrade, her style has just kind of been figured out. She does still present menacing power that is definitely a threat if it ever touches you and it hits you. But the issue is now, again, you have somebody who is strong with the wrestling and who can counter with the timing. The way that Jasmine is able just to read the pressure, all right, well, she's going to allow for the attacking pressure from Jessica to open up her entries. That lets her get to the back. She ends up securing and gets the victory there. A big statement victory that she made in front of her home country in Canada. She spent some time out here training in Denver, fought out here in Denver for that UFC card last year. Just a breath of fresh air of another young contender in that division. And it's nice to see that there is some emerging talent that's coming up in the women's flyweight division. And there's two contenders that are right there on the horizon for Valentina, potentially, should they not make that Whaley fight. You had Benoit Saint-Denis going out there and putting on the performance that he should have against Kyle Propalik. There's just, call it for what it is. Propalik, he was 0-2 in his first tenure in the UFC. They were on a short notice situation, and in Canada, where it was locally convenient for the promotion to be able to sign this kid back on short notice to fight Benoit, Benoit needed to have a confidence builder. He needed to have a fight that got him back into the winner's circle. And especially after that Joel Alvarez fight fell through, I thought that it was a wise decision not to take on somebody like Gamrot on 10, 11, whatever day notice that it was, or Rombeski, any of these type of guys who were very dangerous opponents on that short of notice. He goes, he gets the win, he gets some confidence back about himself, and then now he's asking for the Gamrot fight. I think that that's something that a lot of people would be welcome to, especially given that there's not a lot of folks that are opening up to fight Gamrot. We spoke about it last week, how Arman Sarukian turned down that fight. Could be something that gets Benoit right back into the thick of things at 155 pounds. Hometown guy as well, Mike Malott. He punched his way to victory against Chuck Buffalo, Charles Radke. Marc-Andre Barriault, he had a scary knockout over Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva, unfortunately, it was a bad knockout. He had to be stretchered out in the process, but there was updates that were given. He is okay. It was more precautionary than anything based off of the way that he fell. But, unfortunately for him, that continues a woe in his last few fights. Bruno Silva is a very tough veteran in that division, and he's fought some of the big names at 185 of the last few years. Hopefully he heals and he's able to make a return safely back to action. On the flip side, you have Power Bar picking up that performance bonus. I'm sure that was definitely well appreciated, getting that sort of highlight reel worthy performance in front of his hometown crowd. Again, recapping the bonuses, you had Fight of the Night going to JDM against Bilal in the main event. You had Performance of the Night going to Jasmine Jasudavicius as well as Marc-Andre Barriault. As far as implications for how this main event went, Dana alluded to it prior to the fight, and it's been confirmed now at this stage. Islam is moving up to 170. Islam said that now is the time to go be double champ. Islam has a good chance, but also at the same time, there is going to be the question of how does the size stack up? Because it's not like Jack is a small welterweight. We also have to take into account the Craig Jones effect. Listen, the Craig Jones effect is real, ladies and gentlemen. I told you all last week that him being in the camp was going to be a critical piece of the puzzle for JDM against Islam. Well, Craig Jones has figured out the Dagestani wrestling on a couple of different occasions. Volk versus Islam 1. The way that the grappling was used the other night with JDM against Bilal. I really do believe that in his own evil genius ways, Craig Jones has figured out that style. And that's going to be a situation that is going to make for a very tough challenge for Islam coming up to 170. Collectively, 170 is as wide open as it's been in a long time. You have emerging talent that is just waiting to have an opportunity to fight for gold. You have a new champion in JDM. You have this weekend's main event with Michael Morales, who is an undefeated young stud who is just so well rounded and so young already. You have guys like Ian Gary out there. Shavkat Rakhmonov, whenever he gets healthy and is back from surgery, that's the boogeyman who is on the outside looking in for the title shot. With a big win over Usman coming up and probably another fight in the mix, you've got Buckley right there who's knocking on the door too. There's a lot of talent at 170. Not to mention, okay, Prachis comes in, he rallies back after he had that loss to Ian Gary. No, 170, the future is bright at welterweight right now. There are, again, a lot of implications based off of how that weekend played out. Moving from there, though, we're going to talk about this weekend's UFC Vegas 106 card. UFC Vegas 106, it's back at the Apex this weekend. You have a headliner between a couple of welterweights. This is the old dog taking on the young dog, the young pup, if you will. You have Gilbert Burns, Dorino taking on Michael Morales. The former title challenger, Gilbert Burns, he looks to be able to hold his position in the ranks. I have to give all due credit to Gilbert Burns. He has, throughout his run, he's never turned down a fight. He's fought nothing but the top of rising talent to former title challengers, all the sorts in the mix. You know, the guys that he has on his resume is something that puts him in the discussion of being one of those real true BMFs of the sport, of a guy who it doesn't matter who you are, what your name is, just give me the date and I will show up. Again, if we just look at some of the guys who he's fought in this process, well, both guys who just fought for the title, he fought both of them. We talked about Usman. Well, he fought Usman. Masvidal, Khamzat Chimaev. He's fought all of these guys who are the best of the best at 170 pounds throughout the last few years. You have to give the man his respect and his credit. But I do believe that Father Time is, unfortunately, for some guys, it is undefeated. And this could very well be the case that, you know, Gilbert Burns, he's never lost 4 in a row in his career. He's on a 3-fight skid right now. I don't think that changes this weekend. He has such a formidable opponent in the young undefeated Ecuadorian and Michael Morales. Michael Morales is known for his ability to finish the fight. He's extremely well-rounded. Both of his parents are black belts, judo specialists. He himself is a tremendous grappler with excellent striking, highlight reel type of striking. This was originally scheduled for a few weeks back, got pushed forward, and ends up having its own marquee slot as far as the fight goes. Just, again, overall, I think that this is an opportunity for Morales to go out there and to showcase his skills and to put himself in the discussion as one of the best in the world at 170 pounds, and he has a major name to be able to do so from it. On the flip side, Gilbert Burns has that crazy explosive power, and he is one of the best traditional grapplers, accomplished grappling specialists that the division has ever seen. That's why they fight the fight. Does the veteran have enough tricks, and does he have enough savvy to be able to slow down this young, highly hyped, undefeated prospect? We'll see on Saturday night. I do think, though, that this is one of those kids, when we talk about blue chip prospects, when we talk about thoroughbreds, he's definitely one of them. We've had a lot of these undefeated hype trains lose their O's this year. Bo Nickel, Peyton Talbot, all so on and so forth. Saw a lot of these guys lose this year. Where I think that there is a difference between some of them versus Morales. Morales already has 17 pro fights. He's got a tremendous amount of experience that eclipses a lot of those of his peers that we've mentioned for being undefeated otherwise. This is going to be a great gauge and a measuring stick to see exactly where Morales is at. Another few fights to run down here on the main card with some highlights. We have Paul Craig taking on Adolfo Bellato. Paul Craig, another jiu-jitsu specialist. If you find yourself on the ground in Paul Craig's guard, you know that a triangle is coming, and if he does get that leg up, it's a wrap. He's got the best triangle in all of MMA. The way that he has finished certain world champions with it is undisputed. That all being said, he is very one-dimensional in his game. Don't know exactly how this is going to work out for Adolfo, given that he's going up against somebody who has just a higher degree of experience in the process. They want to build him, but Paul Craig is going to be one of those guys who, we've seen him thrown there in the mix against these rising guys like your Kaios, like your Bows. That's what we're kind of going to see. I think here is where exactly is he at in the process. Sadiq Yusuff taking on Myron Santos. Sadiq Yusuff, he looks to get back and climb his way up the featherweight ranks, taking on the undefeated Myron Santos. I think that anytime that you have Sadiq Yusuff in there, you're talking about a very well-rounded fighter who, when he's lost to really good guys. We're talking about somebody who, unfortunately, did he get highlight reeled by Diego Lopez at UFC 300? Yeah, but look at what Diego Lopez has done in the meantime. I think that is all things that we have to take into account. Moving from there, you have Dustin Stoltzfus against Black Nursultan Ruzaboyev. Ruzaboyev kind of got fraud checked in his last fight. We have him taking on Dustin Stoltzfus, he's a jobber in a lot of senses at middleweight. That comes off very disrespectfully, but it is what it is. He's a guy who they put in certain matchups who we know exactly what it is by who they're putting up against. When he's fighting guys like Michelle and the likes, you know that they're trying to build off of him. Abu, same thing. I think that this might be kind of that effort that they're trying to rally Nursultan back. But again, it's a couple of guys who are in need of a win, who need to get themselves back into the winner's circle. Could be some very high stakes action when you have big boys who can throw some heat. Julian Erosa taking on Melky Costa. At this stage right now, Julian Erosa is, by record, he's a journeyman, but this is a kid who, or a man, I should say, who has such a depth of experience fighting all across the world, so many different styles, and is figuring out ways to continue to not just win in the UFC, but continuing to finish fights. Has he had a couple of runs in the UFC? Absolutely. Did it go his way when he first came off of, say, tough to those initial runs and having a couple of fights that didn't go his direction? Yeah. But I think it speaks more to the character of who Juicy J is, that he did not get discouraged by that. He decided, you know what? I'm going to go take the hard road, and I'm going back to the regional scene. Give me everybody that you could possibly put in front of me. I'm going to fight often. I'm going to take on whoever your promotion's tough guy is. I'm going to take on the best of the best of your regional level shows. And I'm going to keep on trying to earn my way back into the big dance. That's exactly what he's done. Again, fought over against guys like Patty and Cage Warriors on his detours and some of these big shows and marquee moments before he was into this most recent tenure in the UFC, and he's finishing fights. And I think that just speaks to what happens. Sometimes you have vets who it takes them a little bit of time to figure out how to put it all together consistently. And do I ever foresee him going on a world championship run? No. But do I foresee him having a lot of exciting fights throughout the remainder of his run in the UFC? Absolutely. Another couple in the mix that we're going to talk about here from the prelims. You have Jared Gordon taking on Thiago Moises. Jared Gordon is a guy who is as tough as an old leather boot. I can't really say that I think that he is elite in one area of the game. However, he's going to be a guy who fights and puts everything into every performance. He's a gutsy, grit-filled type of fighter who is more of a grinder type of style in that sense, comparatively speaking. But you have Thiago Moises is the guy who he can beat you on the feet, he can beat you grappling. He's had some inconsistencies throughout his time, but that's where I think that this is a fun fight between two veterans that you go out there and you get to see, hey, both of these guys are on multiple contracts deep into their run in the UFC. They're both getting a pretty nice check in the process. Again, comparatively speaking, with where they're at in terms of total fights and whatnot. I'm very interested to see how these styles clash. Another fight to hit before we move along here. We have Tisha Pennington taking on Luana Pinheiro. Tiny Tornado, she's out of Colorado, her as well as her wife, obviously, and Raquel Pennington. He returns to action against the rising Pinheiro in this particular matchup. But, you know, I mean, it's a homer. This is all feelings, no facts. I don't care what anybody says. I'm always going to ride for Tisha. She's been a fan favorite for many ever since she came into the UFC by way of the Ultimate Fighter way back when. And then now, obviously, with the local tie, I'm not going to go against it, plain and simple. Got to shift gears here real quick and take a trip to Kurtz's corner. Now, I'm sure a lot of you probably saw the news over the last day, but one of the anointed ones, if you will, the golden children, the role models. You had Kyle Snyder arrested for soliciting a prostitute. Now, this man is entitled to his due process, and I totally respect and understand that it is innocent until proven guilty. However, this does appear to be a pretty open and shut case. Snyder was arrested for soliciting a prostitute in Columbus, Ohio, where he allegedly exchanged cash for a Hummer with an undercover officer. On the surface, Snyder is a three-time NCAA champion at Ohio State who went on to be an Olympic gold medalist with 3 other world championships to his resume. Looks to be the model athlete. He made history as the youngest ever Triple Crown winner with the World, NCAA, and Olympic championships in 1 year, with more than a decade of consistency in athletic competition at the highest of levels, a family man rooted heavily in his Christian faith. He appeared to be the model athlete. But sometimes looks aren't always what they appear to be. Look, I know there's a lot of devout God Squad people out there, and I'm not trying to say don't have faith. But what I am saying is I do tend to get skeptical hippo eyes for the people who virtue signal to the nth degree when you've got the Bible verse in your bio and you're always speaking in those cliches. You're a married man, but you're trying to get that hawk too and have a hooker spit on that thing. It only makes my skepticism feel validated. I think also of like a young John Jones. You know, if you remember back, young John, all he spoke in was, I want to thank my Lord and Savior, cliches. He has the Philippians tattoo right across his chest, just virtue signaling from the top ropes. We all know how that goes. We all have that friend, or we all know someone who lives in stark contradiction to the message that they preach, and the worst of them are judgmental pots calling the kettle black. But hey, mistakes do happen. On the other hand, we may be looking at this Kyle Snyder situation all wrong. Kyle just won the Open and retained his world team place just a few days before. What if he got back home and his old lady was being a little tight with it? Kyle Snyder is thinking, I just won a freaking championship. What's a guy got to do to get a little sniz around here? What if Kyle was holding on to that seed, waiting for his hand to be raised in victory where he can come back home and copulate with his lovely bride, but then he ends up getting jammed up like a PBR bull waiting in the chute. 100 men versus a gorilla? One Kyle Snyder with a full sack like the Bulldog and Van Wilder might just take that silver back and go belt to ass with it. Moving along, though, we are getting to our final segment of the show, which you have all been waiting for. We're going to go 3 rounds to close out the show. My man, Danny Bailey, what do we have?
All right, Jordan, the controversial phenom Vitor Belfort was announced for the UFC Hall of Fame Pioneer Wing. Should Vitor be inducted?
In short, yes. I fully understand the controversy and the criticisms as they relate to Vitor Belfort, but the man was a highly prominent figure at the top of the sport for decades. I mean, all the way back to the very first show, he was announced as Victor Gracie. They messed up in the initial pronunciation of his name and they added the C and called him Victor. And he was going under the surname of Gracie, as some of the Brazilians do in homage to their training. This was also one of his early shows, was one of the very first shows that Rogan ever was a part of, way back when he was like the sideline or back room reporter, if you will, way back in the day. Vitor was a teenager on the scene beating grown men. Way back when, he was a 240-pound juggernaut with traps that started at his ears and ended at the outside of his delts. I understand he is a trustee of modern chemistry with many noted PED issues, but throughout a big part of his tenure, especially in the early years, everybody's pee was melting cups. Leaded fuel or not, some of the highlights on his reel are the sort that will play in the best of for MMA reels in history and perpetuity. I'm sorry, Michael Bisping, but that is going to be there for forever. Same thing, Luke Rockhold, that spin and wheel kick, those types of things are going to play on for forever. He was also the guy who dare I say, almost had John Jones completely beat and was probably just micrometers away from completely snapping his arm with the armbar in that world title fight before John turned the tables and ended up beating him. But again, another valiant effort against one of the best out there. The TRT Tour era saw him as one of the most feared guys on the roster, pound for pound. To be that big, that fast, that powerful, that athletic, with that look, the mohawk, with the etchings on the side of the head, the preaching that he had about him. He was just an absolute menace during that time. No, he didn't have some storied and decorated championship resume, and he was known, for a lack of a better reference at times, as the guy who couldn't win the big fight or who fell short in the big moments. Yeah, that was the case, but that doesn't take away from the overall body of work that he had throughout his run. And circling back to the original question, the way that I view Hall of Fame conversations, you cannot tell the tale or the history of MMA, and especially of the UFC, without including Vitor Belfort. Therefore, he should be in the Hall of Fame.
ESPN is set to launch a new streaming service at $29.99 per month starting in the fall. What are your thoughts?
This may be a short-lived situation for UFC fans, depending on what the broadcast rights deal that gets struck for the next term is. The current deal in place expires at the end of this year. I'm not exactly sure where that puts the overall negotiations between the companies in that respect. I know that there will be haters who are coming out of the woodwork that want to go after the UFC and Dana and saying that, oh, they're just after more money from us and blah, blah, blah. But folks, this is not a UFC or a TKO decision. This is a move on the network as a whole for ESPN. This is something that will see the streaming service include everything from the ESPN linear networks like ESPN, ESPN2, and all the others under their umbrella that is included within this package. For those who had ESPN Plus for just the UFC, this might be a turnoff and continue to drive the boat to other means of watching. Again, this will be interesting to see how all of this factors into the negotiations as the new rights deal starting for 2026 is struck. It might not be a bad thing though either, because hey, for some of us, we might want to watch some Monday Night Football, whatever, and Stream East isn't always reliable, so might give us a little bit of value in the process.
Former UFC light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira was seemingly the victim of an X account hack, or was he?
I don't think that he was hacked. Here is why. I think that the UFC tried to strong arm him into taking a fight on short notice in 6 weeks at International Fight Week. I think that they offered the rematch for Magomed Ankalaev, which was rumored to be in motion for potentially August. They tried to move that up to International Fight Week, the variant June 28th. And knowing just what we've heard from what came out from the antitrust suit, and that's public record, the UFC sometimes likes to use some bully tactics, if you will, when it comes to negotiations or trying to get what they want done in the moment. So if you're somebody in the sense of Alex Pereira, who flat out says, like, this is not a doable timeline, whether it's because he's just out and about traveling, experiencing the world, healing from some injuries, whatever it may be, he said June is not a good timeline. If the UFC in that call just a couple of days ago got to the point of saying essentially, well, who do you think you are? You are who you are because we made you, and so on and so forth. Those types of discussions, which it's not above them to have or to speak in that sort of candor. I can understand where Poatan felt like he was disrespected and that he felt like, hey, like, I've always answered the bell for you. I've always answered the call up to this point, and now you want to disrespect me like this? I can totally understand where that is the thought process. I could totally understand where, in that maybe it wasn't him directly that put the tweet out, but it was somebody within his camp. I find it hard to believe that he was just magically hacked amidst these circumstances. I could be wrong, but it's too coincidental based off of the known moving parts of the situation. I think that he put it out there, and after he put it out there, he probably got another phone call that essentially addressed it and, made things right or smoothed them over or pulled an even stronger hand potentially when he came out with the retraction and said that he got hacked. Obviously, that's a developing story that we may hear more of in the future going forward. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Was he hacked? Was it something that was a deliberate statement on his end that is just kind of the modern day 2025 blanket statement cover up whenever something happens that, oh, I was hacked in the process? What do you guys think? Let me know on Instagram or on Threads. Jordan Kurtz at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. Want to thank my man, Danny Bailey, behind the boards, holding it down for me as always, each and every week. Want to give a special thanks to the crew here at the number 38 for this show presented to you by Volo. We'll be back with you next week, same time, same place. I'm Jordan Kurtz. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports.